Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and thank you so much for tuning into one of our talks today. I'm so thrilled to be joined today by Jessie Mei, currently starring in the Netflix series Shadow and Bone. And I wanted to talk a little bit about your audition because you actually auditioned with sides that were written specifically for that purpose and not part of the scripts. But it sounds like even within that they had so much backstory and detail about your character, about her parents and her history. So how did that start to give you an initial inkling of who this character was going to be?
I love it with auditions because sometimes you get an audition through and it has a character's name, maybe how old they are, maybe, doesn't take any bullshit or something like that, right? And I really, really like it. Just for me, I think some other people like to be able to come up with their own thing, but I like it when they say, this is who this person is. And they had a really in-depth one, a nice little paragraph for Alina that was saying, she's an outsider and she's got really keen observational skills, and she's got survival instincts, and she has to keep her head down, and all these really little details that just made me color her in my mind so much easier. So yeah, then coming to do the scene, as you said, yeah, it was written for the audition, and they changed the whole thing. It wasn't anything really to do with the actual story. They sort of invented this, this different backstory for Alina for the purposes of just giving us more to do in the scene. And I just felt I just got her. I understood what she might be feeling and how she's going to be dealing with the situation. She's in this new place and she's completely overwhelmed, and I loved it. I thought it was a really, really good scene. And I actually the other day found on my phone, to learn lines, I often record it into my phone. And I found the recording that I did, 2 years ago now, I think it must have been. It was super weird. Alina still sounds the same though. I kind of kept the same thing going. So that was quite cool to uncover.
Yes, that means your first impression was the right one.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, I know that you had the opportunity to have a conversation with Leigh Bardugo, who's the novelist who wrote the series, and that she, immediately saw your audition and was just like, this is the person that's going to play this character, this is Alina. And that when you asked her if there was anything to make sure you didn't omit from your performance, that Leigh's answer was the comedy and the humor that comes in Alina. And so I wanted to ask you about how you then worked to make sure that you were constructing that into her throughout the series, because she is quite funny, but it's a really lovely and kind of wry humor that really fits her personality.
Yeah, it's interesting because the way some of it was written in the script, it's very easy to slip into sort of, because of the high stakes situations, you could almost slip into her being a bit snappy and a bit too sarcastic. And our first block director, Leigh, he kept saying, we don't want her to be petulant. We want her to be strong, and we want her to be able to say these things, but not whiny. So it was important to get that right when she was making these little remarks. And because as well, I really wanted to make sure that we understood what she's going through. Because if she's just flippantly, coming out with one-liners all the time, you might not understand the emotional weight of what's going on for her. And one thing I always love about characters in shows, but characters in real life, people who are just funny, they're not being funny, they're not cracking jokes, there's something just about them that's kind of quirky. I sort of thought, okay, if she's not going to be coming out with stand-up comedian sort of one-liners, whatever, maybe I could inject her with a bit of humor just in the way she moves, the way she looks and stuff, so she's funny to the audience, maybe not even if she's not being hilarious in world, you know what I mean? And so I hope to get that right, because I think there's something quite sweet and relatable about Alina sort of just being a little bit a bit weird.
One of the key aspects of her as well is obviously that she has a huge sense of loss and trauma in her backstory, and particularly with the loss of her parents. And that not only informs who she is, but it also informs so much of her relationship and that bond with Mal, because they've in essence become each other's family. And so I wanted to ask you about taking that and really just building it so deeply into the fabric of who she is as a character for you.
Yeah, that's so much of, like I said, when I first got the audition, it was saying about her being an orphan and being an outsider and everything. And I think sometimes you might think, oh, because if she suffered all of this trauma and this difficulty, that maybe she wouldn't be the person that she is in the show. But I think part of my thinking was that we need to believe that Alina is strong, and we need to believe that she has gone through a lot, but she's come out the other side, and that's where her power and her strength comes from. So I wanted to make sure that she was able to like take some of the you know, the abuse that she gets. I wanted to be able to like almost take it on the chin, which isn't a good thing, but you know, that I've survived. She's got survival skills, right? And that was really important. And like you said as well, making sure that that bond with Mal felt really like family, because while obviously he's a romantic interest as well, he is the only person that she has. And that's why, you know, it's not just, oh, I fancy you. It's like, you are literally my only thing that I have had, my only consistency. You know, obviously in the, you know, the orphanage, and they have Anakuya, who is the woman who runs the orphanage, who, you know, at the beginning they have that little conversation where she does have some sort of parental figure, but Mal is everything to her. You know, her whole family. So it was really important that we really believed in that relationship, because that was the only one she had. And you know, just having to be independent. We see Alina making decisions quite a lot, and doing things that kind of unexpected, because again, being a survivor, she's had to get by on her own wits and her own decision making. So all of those things came into play when thinking about her. Yeah.
And the relationship with Mal is really fascinating to watch in those early episodes, because for the majority of the series, the two of you are actually not on screen together, and yet you're really having to build the intensity and the connection and the intimacy of this relationship. So what were the challenges in trying to construct that on screen without having Archie on screen with you to do it?
Yeah, it was really interesting, actually. I mean, what was really good in terms of like behind the scenes was that we were all really close. Like, we're all just such good friends. And so even if I wasn't working with Archie during those episodes, I probably would have seen them that day anyway. And yeah, keep making sure that they still, you know, the best thing I think was having those little visual kind of motifs, like with the scar and things, because it gave me as an actor something to look at when Alina's thinking about Mal and things like that. So that was really good. It's interesting as well, the first time we see Mal and Alina together is actually one of the last things we shot. You know, just because that's what happens often. You know, you have to reshoot things because of, I don't know, lighting or whatever. So yeah, it is sort of weird, because it's almost like they weren't together at all until they then meet up in episode 6. But me and Archie just like get on really well, and he's so brilliant. He's such a beautiful actor. He's so beautiful, like everything he does, and you can see he's thinking. And I think we were able, because in some ways the way that we like to work is quite similar. I think it kind of reflects in the characters as well. I think you feel like these two characters grew up together, because they both, neither of them are particularly loud or brash. They're both kind of quiet in their own way. And I think just making sure we were almost like mirroring each other in lots of ways was important. So I would often like see what Archie was doing and make sure that I was on the same level, because that's what it is, you know, when you meet people who are a family, you're like, oh my god, you're all the same. Like, so that's one thing that went through my mind quite a lot. Yeah.
And with the rapport with Kirigan, one of the aspects that I found really interesting as it becomes a bit of a romantic entanglement is the fact that there was a very conscious choice for Alina to be the first one to make any sort of physical contact and touch. And so I wanted to ask you about how that became the very specific choice, because it says a lot about, you know, her being his equal, and the power dynamic between them is very different by her being the first one to reach out, literally.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we had such a great writing team. We owe so much to them with all, you know, all the little changes that they made, you know, because they took all these like wonderful scenes from the books and just tweaked them a bit. And it was really important, you know, to the writers, especially the women in the room, that Alina had a lot more agency. And totally agree. Obviously, it makes for a better story in lots of ways, because it makes sense. If it didn't make sense, if Alina's character was, you know, we hear so often that Alina and Kirigan are two sides of the coin. There's only two like us, and, you know, we're yin and yang kind of thing. It makes sense for her to then feel like, okay, I am your equal. During that episode, she's having a bit of a little, you know, like a glow up, where she's deciding, okay, I'm going to fake it till I make it. I'm going to start my new life here. You know, he's my equal. I feel safe in this environment. And it makes sense that she would do that. Because I don't think if that hadn't been the process, I wouldn't have wanted just to be thrown in there for the sake of it. So it's perfect that there is more agency for Alina, but it feels right for the character. It doesn't feel out of character for her. And it's quite nice for his character as well, you know, because especially if you haven't read the books, you don't necessarily, I know he's all in black and all that stuff, but you might not necessarily know he's the villain. And at that point, you know, it's quite a nice moment the first time that they kiss. It's quite like, oh, okay. So yeah, I think it was really a good choice for them to have changed that. And obviously when it does turn more intimate and he says, oh, are you sure? The second time that they kissed, that was again in the script, and it was something that they were really keen on making sure that we had in there. And I'm really glad, because while not everything should be political, I think if you're going to say something, make it something good.
Yeah.
Right.
And some of the fake it till you make it aspect feels like it comes from the relationship and the rapport with Genya as a character. And there's a lot of interesting parallels between the two of them. They're both women who've spent a lot of time in isolation and not necessarily having a lot of close relationships or being able to know that they can trust people around them. So how are you looking to Genya as a character in the way that was then influencing and evolving Alina?
I love my favorite scenes in the show. When I watched it back, are the scenes with Alina and Genya. I think they're so beautiful. I love friendships, and I think that's why I love this show, because it is earnest in that it has this like earnest of loving friendship kind of theme to it. And I just love Genya as a character. You know, she was my favorite character in the books as well. And yeah, like you said, they are very similar. Myself and Daisy, who plays Genya, you know, we spoke about this a lot, where they are just two very lonely people who've gone through a lot, who find something, you know, they find each other, because the rest of the people that Alina meets at the little palace, she's not sure about them. But Genya immediately becomes an ally to her when she stands up for her and sends the racist maids away. And Alina warms up to her and feels safe, and vice versa. You know, Genya feels like this, you know, Alina's not judging her either. And that's so lovely, and it allows for their relationship to just blossom. And what I liked about their friendship as well is by the time we got to episode 5, you know, obviously we lost a few scenes unfortunately in the earlier episodes, but by the time we got to episode 5, Alina's almost, I was thinking it would be nice for her to almost start emulating Genya a bit. You know, they almost have the same hairstyle in the scene where we see them. Alina's being a bit more sort of, you know, a bit more like Genya, which is what you do when you really love, and, you know, you meet a new friend and you're excited, and they almost start copying each other. So I wanted to slip that in a little bit as well. I wanted her to sort of be almost looking up to Genya, because then that was the last time we see them before we find out that Genya betrayed her. So we needed to make sure that friendship felt really, really real. And obviously Daisy is just an absolute angel. We had such a nice time. So it was pretty easy, really.
And Alina overall is a really strong character, but she is going through a slight journey of questioning her self-identity and who she is, who she's becoming. And so, you know, kind of evolving on that even further, were you looking a lot at the other characters throughout the series and thinking about adaptive ways that she might be taking on aspects, either of their personality or traits that they would be bringing out in her in different ways?
Yeah. One of the things that when I first got the job, and even beforehand when I was dreaming about having the job, you know, it was important that Alina started off almost being like a blank canvas in some ways, because that's what they said in the original description. You know, she's had her head down. So I wanted it to be every time she met someone that she would be affected by them, because then we believe in the relationships, we care about them. And so yeah, like you said, every person, I wanted to make sure that Alina got something out of each of these relationships and learned something about herself, and hoped that would show on screen. And I think from Alina at the start, who we met, even if it was what we shot at the end, you know, I think you can see how much she grows. And I think partly that is, you know, to do with the writing and everything. But yeah, like you said, I think it's really important for her to learn stuff from, and for me as an actor, like I was blessed to be able to work with pretty much everyone. And my thing that I feel is the best to do in a scene is to let that person affect you. And, you know, maybe it might not be what I was expecting them to do, but if they deliver the line in that way, it makes me think, oh, okay. And then that translates to, you know, what we see on screen. So that was pretty cool, being able to work with so many people who all, in my head, like had a hand in how her story played out.
But beyond the opportunity for you to learn from all the cast around, I loved that you were describing how your rapport with Ben Barnes, that, you know, he actually was also learning and taking away a lot from you as well. And so I wanted to ask you, what are some of the things that you feel that you were able to give him as a scene partner and performer?
Well, because we're quite different. We have a very different process. You know, Ben's very, he loves words and the meaning behind words and everything, and the way he talks about it is just it's so interesting. And I think he's very considered in his approach, and I think he has a very clear idea of what he wants to do. Whereas I'm probably the opposite. I kind of have a lot of feeling, and, you know, I will have an idea of how what this character be thinking. But like I said, if Ben or someone else would throw something I wasn't expecting, to be able to just go with it is really nice and freeing for me. And it means that, you know, those moments can feel more authentic. So I think we both learned from each other. I certainly felt like, you know, Ben's he's got such gravitas, and he's at the time, I used to take the piss so much. I'd always be taking the piss how slow he delivered all his lines. And I mean, it was terrible. We would tease each other all the time, but in hindsight, I could have done with a lot more. You know, I certainly did start to think, okay, I'm gonna take things a bit slower when it's an important moment, because just me as Jessie, like, I speak at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And so we were laughing a lot. Like, when we first saw a couple of scenes, I was thinking, I sound like I'm speaking so fast and you sound completely normal. So you know, we were able to just have a lot of fun, and just, you know, I think it was nice that he wasn't just going, oh, well, this is how this works and this is how this works and whatever. You know, he was always asking me what I thought, and which meant that our scenes were really fun to shoot, and I felt like I could make suggestions and we could talk about things together. So yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah. And obviously one of the spaces where it really slows down for your character is when she does discover that she has this power and this ability. And it's such an internal process and journey and realization for her in every single moment that you're channeling that. So how did you set about navigating that internal journey, and how you wanted to bring that out in your performance in that way?
I think, yeah, it's not one of those things where I like to watch in real life. I like to watch people a lot and understand where, you know, why they're behaving the way they are. And I remember a friend of mine going through something kind of not similar. Not similar.
She learned she could control the sun.
Something very, very not similar, but, you know, quite a big life change. And more often than not, she would just sort of, you know, be very pensive and thinking about it. And that was very interesting to me, because you'd think that she'd want to talk about it all the time. But it was that thought of thinking, oh, she's having to process an awful lot right now. And so I remember bearing that in mind a lot with Alina of, you know, she is plonked into the middle of, you know, wherever she is. And she's, again, being a survivor, she's just like, I'm just going to adapt. I'm just going to fit in. But she's thinking, and she's having to process everything all the time. So that was quite, you know, interesting. I was hoping it would sort of work out, because obviously that was a choice that I made. You know, and she doesn't know who she is at that point either. So she's almost just like sitting around being terrified, but pretending that she's not, which was a really sort of fun, complicated thing to play. And then hopefully we then see later on the season that she's lost that and she's gotten over it and she's learned. But yeah.
There's also a real physical evolution in how she garners it as well. And you use a lot of different styles of motion, in terms of, at the beginning, it's much more centered, it's tighter to her body. And then you start using much wider stances and more elaborate motion. And so I was really interested in the process of figuring out what the motion of this manifestation would be for you.
Yeah, well, you know, again, it all comes back to that first description of her being a survivor. And, you know, when you are someone, you know, for example, people in their lives who've been abused or bullied or something, lots of people that I know in my personal life, body language says so much, and the keeping yourself closed and alert and ready. Like, I know lots of people who have that body language because of what they've gone through. And again, it's a TV show, it's visual, so we can, if there is like a free for free, you can show what Alina's thinking or feeling. I was going to do that. I remember like in episode 2, there's a moment where it's when Alina and Kerrigan first meet, and he says, "Come closer" or something. And I was it was like, she takes a little step closer, and I wanted to really make sure that we understood she really does not want to get any closer to him. So that's what, keeping all those movements really small and really like tense, and she's ready to, her fight or flight is, super what's the word, you know what I mean. She's, it's like a hair trigger, so she's always ready to go, whereas by the time we get to sort of like the middle of the season, she's relaxed and she's sort of like able to sort of bumble around and be her sort of silly self we haven't really got to see yet. So yeah, so much of her journey is in the way that she holds herself. And you go from the character we meet in episode 2 who's wobbling around in Kerrigan's tent to Alina standing on the deck of the ship saying, "This is who I am." That was really important, that we could see the difference in how she held herself and her voice and all of that stuff as well.
And there's such a monumental shift as well when she ends up with the physical embodiment of the stag's antlers, literally nestled into her neck and into her being. And I think the way that they visually constructed that is really fascinating as well, because there's no way that she can ever avoid seeing it out the periphery of her eye. So were there a lot of conversations early on about what that was going to look like? Did you know specifically, okay, this is where it's going to be sitting on her, she's always going to be catching it? And how did you then want to manifest that into her?
Yeah, well, one of the first things, so in the books, the amplifiers are sort of like jewelry. So her collar is a collar, around her neck. And it was one of the first things that we spoke about, because I had to go for a cast. They had to take a cast of my neck, which was horrible. I hate sitting still. I had to sit still for so long, and I had to do my neck, my collarbones and my arm for the moment where Alina's arm lights up. So terrible experience. But yeah, I thought it was such a good choice, because especially the fact that it wasn't her choice, this has been forced upon her. I think it really hits home that she's being violated in this moment. It's a violent act. She's in pain, and her heart rate has to be slowed down because it's such a painful process. And I think that was really important for Alina, for the story, and for the characters' relationships. Her relationship with Kerrigan, maybe there was an opportunity for them to, I don't know, work out their differences in some ways, but there's no going back from that. He's completely just betrayed her trust. And it is just absolutely gruesome. It was really nice, actually, that when we were shooting, all of our directors, they were all so nice and wanted to hear our thoughts and wanted us to have our ideas and things. And I remember we were about to shoot the scene with Genya in episode 7. And our director, Jeremy, said, "What do you think Alina will be doing right now?" And I was saying, well, honestly, me as Jessie standing here, I can just about see the antlers, but I can't obviously see it properly. So Alina can't see her antlers. So my instinct would be that she would go straight to the mirror and have a look. And we ended up shooting that. And I think it's a really good moment, a little beat just before the beginning of that scene, because it's just absolutely horrifying. It's she's just been completely, so I loved that choice. I hated wearing it, but it was really itchy. But I think it was a really good choice. And then to have it then slowly melt into her at the end, was really cool. I'm really glad that they did that.
And obviously that's the most extreme kind of exterior aspect of her throughout the entire series. But there's so many other moments leading up to that, even at the very beginning when she's told to wear the veil, to go in and meet the royal family. And then, the way that her outfits begin to evolve and change into the society that everybody's trying to adapt her into. The fact that she then chooses to wear the outfit with a little bit of black because of the relationship with Kerrigan. And so how did a lot of aspects of that help you to find her mental and emotional state throughout the show?
Yeah, I think the costumes are such an important part of it. You know, so much of, you know, in real life, you know, we pick out the clothes we want to wear because we want to say something to the world. We want to tell people about us in some way, whether you were having a good day or a bad day. And it's the same, you know, for costume, I think. Where Alina, one of my favorite costumes actually for Alina was in episode 2, where she's in, half of her is in her army uniform, and then she's got the healer's kefta that we didn't see her get given, unfortunately, but she's got this healer's kefta that's too big for her, and it's covered in mud, and it's just, I felt like it was perfect for that moment for her character. You know, she's just sort of working out that she's Grisha and hasn't quite settled in yet, and she still wants to be back in the army, and she's got her army clothes on, and I think that was, all these little details add so much to what's going on with her. And you know, she gets her blue kefta, and she makes the decision. It was a scene that got cut, but she decides, I don't want to wear a black one, I want to wear a blue one because I want to fit in. And that's what she's doing in those episodes where she's wearing the blue kefta. She wants, again, to keep her head down. She doesn't want to draw any attention to herself. And it's only when she thinks, I'm going to stick to the black now, that we can see that she's no longer scared, and she's ready to sort of, you know, she's feeling more at home, and she's feeling like she can be herself more. So yeah, all of the costumes I thought were so good at adding just that little layer to what she's going through. And especially, you know, at the end when she's got this kefta it's gold, but it's got Kerrigan's black shadows on. And if anything, that was my least favorite costume to wear, because I had the prosthetic antlers on, and it kept getting all rucked up, and it was, you know, I felt really uncomfortable. But I was like, this is good, because I don't want Alina to be comfortable in this. You know, she doesn't want this. She didn't choose to wear this. And then, you know, and she didn't choose to have her hair like this. This isn't her. And where we leave her, you know, she's back to more of her natural self. So that was, yeah, costume is so important. I didn't think I realized that until I was in them. And then you start to think, yeah.
And then on a separate note, I wanted to ask you about the stage production of All About Eve when you were in that, because that was the last thing I got to see in London on a trip home. And my parents as a complete surprise. I didn't tell them where we were going. I was just like, meet me in London, we're going somewhere. But one of the things I thought was so superb about that production was the scope and the use of mixed media, and the fact that there were cameras that would come on stage and then that would be projected. And so what I was really interested in from that is how you had to think about the scope and the movement on stage in such a wildly different way because of that extension that was brought into the directing style.
Yeah, it was so interesting, and it was my first, I've never really done any theatre, so to have, you know, theatre but then also have cameras it was like a lot. Because, you know, you've got to be doing your slightly more over the top sort of theatre acting, you know, for the people at the back, but then you have also got cameras like in your face at some points. I thought it was great because, you know, I only really got to see the show on the NT Live when we all went to see it, actually, when it came out later. And it is so nice because you get to see everyone sort of, because pretty much everyone in that cast had experience in both theatre and screen, so they were able to like just flip between the two of those things. But yeah, I mean, it was, we rehearsed all of the moments with the cameras, with, you know, they were so well put together and everyone knew where they were meant to be. We had like the beginning opening where everyone's walking through each other backstage, and it was so tightly choreographed. You know, if one person was slightly out of time, it would almost make you go like, what? But it was really cool. It was a really great sort of first job for me. I learned an awful lot on All About Eve.
Yeah, well, it was a superb production, and your work in Shadow and Bone's been really fantastic to watch. So congratulations on all of that, and thank you so much for this great Q&A.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been lovely.